Welcome to the Mind Body Temple podcast, your healing space with Dr. Rod. The purpose of this podcast is to bring hope to patients with chronic pain, anxiety, and depression. The subject of today is based on the questions that I've received from you, and that's the relationship between the brain health and chronic pain. We perceive the world around us by our brain. The brain that we have is the most advanced machine that we know in the universe that we are aware of right now. It's the most advanced form of the matter. As Sadhguru says, we are given an advanced machine, but we don't know the user manual and we don't know how to operate it. Our body sends up signals related to pain or any other sensations to our brain, and our brain makes sense of these signals. In order for this brain to interpret them well and in order to understand it well, we need to have a healthy brain. There's a lot of changes that happens in our nervous system when we get chronic pain. In reality, chronic pain is a nervous system, or I can say a central nervous system disease. It's an ailment of changes that happens in nervous system. What will happen is that the signals come from the periphery, means our body, come to our spinal cord. From the posterior part of our spinal cord, it goes all the way up to our brain. On the passage through our brain, it passes through the center of our brain, which is responsible for keeping the memory of all the adversity and emotional hardships that we have had through our lives. And then some of all these signals get to the upper part or higher part of our brain, somatosensory cortex, which is the center for sensation in our brain, and prefrontal cortex when we make sense of our environment and make decisions about how to react towards them. The combination of all of these different areas of our brain make the perception of the pain for us. And that's how we understand that we are in pain. That's how we memorize the pain. That's how we emotionally and physically respond to the pain. Now, if the brain is healthy, we can make good decisions about how to manage our pain. But if the brain is not healthy, even with good decisions, we will not get into doing those decisions or making any effort towards betterment. Because the brain is where we perceive the world, but it's also when we decide to get the things done in our life, we have to use proper use of our brain. Now, signals come to the brain. Brain is made of billions of nerve cells. The nerve cells have structures inside them and have the membrane. The membrane of the nerve cells are important to transmit the signals. And structures inside the brain are made up of so many different elements that if we have proper supply of those elements, the nerve cells can function. And then the nerve cells have to have proper connections together. Now, if you have problem with elements inside the nerve cells, if you have problem with the connection between the nerves, and if you have problem with the membrane of the nerve cells, then there is dysfunction that happens in the structure of the brain. There are many other elements like environmental toxins or inflammation that can also affect the function of our brain. So it's important that we try to reduce the inflammation in our body, try to give the nutritions that are necessary for the health of our brain, and try to get rid of the exhaust that comes from the metabolism from the nerve cells in our brain. And that's when we sleep, we get rid of all of the exhaust that comes from metabolism of our nerve cells in our brain. So all of these elements are important. We need to have proper sleep. When we sleep, we get rid of all of the exhaust that comes from the metabolism. Basically, we clean up the environment of our brain when we sleep. In order to do that, we need to have proper circulation to the brain, that blood comes and blood goes. So through this process, we can get all the nutrients coming to our brain, and brain can get rid of all the exhaust of metabolism, all the junk that builds up with activities of the brain. We need to clean that up, and that happens through our sleep. In order to have proper blood flow to our brain, we need to have proper circulation, which is linked to proper blood pressure. So it's important that we have good control of our blood pressure. We need to have proper supply of supplements and proper supply of nutrients coming to our brain, and that is through the same circulation. So it's important to have good nutrition, and we have good blood pressure control, good glucose control. All of these elements affect what is coming to our brain. Imagine you have a very advanced race car like a Ferrari, but if the Ferrari is not well oiled, or if it doesn't have enough gas, it will not be able to run. If it's not driven well, then it may get into accidents. So it's important that we also conduct the way we use our brain, and that's through proper mindfulness, meditation, proper attention. What we eat can induce inflammation, and what we do can also induce inflammation. Our activity level is very important. When we are doing exercises, our brain makes good neurotransmitters. There is this element called brain drive neurotropic factor, or BNDF, that helps the function of the nerve cells and even connections and regeneration of nerve cells. These elements work better or are induced better when we do exercises. So it's important that we eat well, we sleep well, we move well, and also we think well, because the way we think affects our emotions. Our emotions affects our body sensations. The continuation of what we do would affect the brain health and would reduce the amount of inflammation that builds up in our brain, because inflammation in the brain can negatively affect the function, and that Ferrari cannot work well if it's not well oiled. When there is inflammation, there is swelling in the brain, and brain cannot get rid of all of that junk that builds up with the function, because the circulation cannot get through well when the brain is swollen. So it's good for us to know that every little thing that we can do to improve our health of the brain can positively affect the management of our pain. And with the practices, with the mindfulness practices, we can affect the amount of positive neurotransmitters that are built up in our brain. And that build-up of good neurotransmitters can positively affect our emotions, and positive effect on our emotion can positively affect the body sensations that we have. And that's how we perceive our body around us, with having a healthier brain. The food that we eat can either remove the inflammation from our body, or it can induce inflammation. That's why we divide the food into two groups of inflammatory food and non-inflammatory food. It's easy these days to look up the information. You can easily look up what is the inflammatory food, all the fast foods that you have to get rid of from your diet. If you have diabetes, you cannot have them because it will increase your blood sugar, and increased blood sugar can also induce more inflammation in your body. But for the brain also is the same thing. If you use the fast food, which has poor nutritional quality, it can induce more inflammation in the brain. On the other hand, if you eat good food that reduces inflammation, we call them non-inflammatory food, like avocado, eggs, and legumes. And Mediterranean diet, for example, is a type of diet that is very well studied and has shown over many studies that it can reduce inflammation or even prevent inflammation. And a plant-based diet is a type of diet that you can basically have good nutrition through having plants and herbs and vegetables that can give you all the elements that you need, but at the same time would prevent inflammation. We still need some animal protein in order to have all the elements necessary, because when we eat proteins, we build up a byproduct that if it builds up more, it can cause brain function impairments, like mild cognitive impairments, like homocysteine, for example. If we don't take vitamin B12 with it, we cannot have a balanced level of that, and increased level of homocysteine can cause mild cognitive impairment, and even it can lead towards the path to Alzheimer's. One of the reasons that we can have less function of our brain. For these reasons, it's important that we stay away from environmental toxins, And also it's important that we treat ailments like herpes infection, for example, that can affect our brain. So the pillars of health for good sleep, movements, exercise, and good nutrition, and connecting to others, staying away from isolation. All of these pillars of health and elements, positive thinking and mindfulness, can help us to have increased level of vital energy, increased level of general health, and also it can help us to manage our pain through having a better, healthier brain. And I wish all of us can live a healthy life and have great, healthy brains to have an amazing, exuberant experience of life. Until next time, goodbye.